Well, on today's episode of the AgCulture Podcast, I had the pleasure of having Wilco Brouwer de Koning here from the Netherlands. Welcome, Wilco.
Thank you, Paul.
Really excited to have this discussion today. We first met, I believe it was online, through Linda McDonald, who is a former guest of the podcast back in our first year of recording. And she put us in touch, and we did a webinar together a couple years ago for the first time. And then we met each other again first time in person. That was in Chile in October of last year, and spent a few days together at the International Dairy Federation Congress that was down there. That was a great experience. I did a episode on that as well, and had a lot of fun hanging out with you down there. So I'm looking forward to having you share your experience with being a fellow Nuffield scholar and also as a fellow dairy farmer.
Yeah, and I think you ended your Nuffield, right, in Chile on stage.
Yeah, that was my final report. Was released the day that I did my talk there in Chile, and was able to give my recap of my experience with Nuffield. And you are a 2025 scholar, so the year behind me, and you're getting close to the end of your journeys. But look forward to having you share a little bit about what you learned. But why don't you start with your background, where you come from, and then we can get into why you decided to do a Nuffield scholarship.
Yeah, so great. So thank you to be here. Nice to be in the US as well. Yeah, so my name is Wilco Brouwer de Koning. I'm a dairy farmer in the Netherlands. So we live half an hour north of Amsterdam. We milk 180 cows. So yeah, the average in the Netherlands is like 110 cows. So bigger than average. I do the farm with my brother, and we have some labor to help. And of course, the older generation, my father is still helping a couple days in the week. Besides that, I'm a dairy farmer. I'm just looking a little bit like you, Paul. I also want to do other stuff beside only to be a dairy farmer. So I'm in the board of the Dutch Farmers Organization, and there I'm responsible for everything about labor on dairy farms, and also all the international stuff. So I'm involved in the International Dairy Federation as well. So I'm the dairy farmer representative worldwide over there as well in the program team. My other theme for my board membership is biodiversity in nature, and that's also a little bit already to the link to my Nuffield topic.
Yeah, and what was the reason? What was the thing that really intrigued you about studying biodiversity on a global scale and being able to travel around the world to study that?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think the first one is that everyone worldwide asked from farmers and dairy farmers that they should farm more sustainable. And of course, as dairy farmers, we can farm more sustainable, but then we also need a sustainable milk price. So we need extra money or other things if we really want to make the next step. In the Netherlands, we already started this process already in around 2012 to think about how we can achieve that. And I was really curious about what's happening in the rest of the world. Is the rest of the world also making steps? So that's why my Nuffield topic is how to measure and reward biodiversity in the dairy chain. Because I really think that if farmers can make the next step, you need to reward them. And reward is not always only money, but it's also you're a really good farmer. Yeah? So it's the feeling that what you're doing, producing healthy food, is worth to be a farmer.
As you've traveled around the world to these different regions, you spent some time in South America, you spent some time in New Zealand, you spent some time here in the US and Canada. What are some of the differences that you're seeing in that realm?
So I think, of course, you have Europe, and inside of Europe, you have differences between the different countries. If you look in the Netherlands, and maybe the audience already heard some things about ammonia and nitrogen and all the problems in the Netherlands. So in the Netherlands, like ammonia is a real issue. Yeah? So not only for dairy farmers, but also for the industry, we are really locked down because of the rules around ammonia. And then I had my interview in New Zealand with a professor around biodiversity, and then asked her, okay, so is ammonia also a big issue? Because in Netherlands, everything is blocked because of ammonia. Like the farms, we cannot build buildings, etc., because of ammonia. And see, ammonia, is that a problem? Because plants will grow, plants will need nitrogen to grow. So why is ammonia a problem? So that was for me, was kind of a moment that I thought, yeah. So we locked the whole country. and all the rules. And then on the other side of the world, they don't even see the problem. So that was kind of an eye-opening. And I think you also have different perspective on sustainable farming. So if you look at Europe, and maybe in the Netherlands is even on top on Europe, and we have to make steps on different subjects because we have rules. We have to keep getting goals on water quality, biodiversity, nature restoring, etc. So we are thinking more of how can we restore that and have a still earning money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're like here in the US, it's more like, okay, but what steps can we make to earn money? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it's more from other point of view, and I think that's kind of interesting. And of course, the steps what you can do as farmer is also different in different areas of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Japan, and if you look at Japan, food safety is more important. They're not that far yet that sustainable food is even also important. So they're just a little bit behind. Yeah? So it also depends on, like in the Western countries, we pay, like in the Netherlands, consumers only pay 8% of their income to food. So they can easily pay a little bit more for sustainable food. But like in Japan, it was almost 60% sometimes of their income they have to pay for food. So they are not looking for sustainable food. So that's really different levels or what steps you can make.
Yeah, and with that, looking at it financially from that perspective, even in Europe and in the U.S. here, where we don't pay a lot of our income to cover our food expenses, there still always seems to be pushback from consumers, right, on raising the cost of food. We're seeing that now with everything being inflated, but when we see things inflated, it always boils down to the things you hear on the news are food costs are rising, right? So how do you incentivize financially and drive that through the market, even when you have these small portions of somebody's income that they don't want to see raised up at all?
So what I see worldwide is that, of course, it starts with that you have your consumer and you have the society. And that's two different persons. The person who is in the society thinks something about the farmer or the steps that the farmer must step or must make. And then the same person is in the supermarket and then he's a consumer and he's buying the cheapest product. They want that we change as a farmer, but they still buy the cheapest product. So that's not connected. So I think that's a struggle worldwide. What I saw in different countries is that like the big companies are making more progress. So like in Europe, you can really see that supermarkets are a big player. Like in the old days, you had the conventional milk and you had the organic milk, and now there's a part in between. So supermarkets really make their own sustainable brand and pay farmers more for sustainable milk. That's one, but you also can see it in like the Nestle, the Danones, and the Mars. They have to do some sustainable reporting, and they are starting with that as well. So it started really with climate, with CO2, because that's kind of easy to explain what you're doing, and now it's still moving a little bit more to nature, biodiversity, etc. And climate I think, is part of the whole package. So you can see it's moving, and I think if you look at to make steps and rewarding sustainability, so the first one is that if you reduce your emissions, like ammonia is just a loss for a farmer. We are just losing nitrogen into the air. With nitrate in water, we just lose nitrogen into the water. So I think the first step is that if we reduce our negative impact, our negative emissions, it's an earning for the farmer and it's better for biodiversity. So I think that's always the first step. And you can do a lot with management to make the first step. And then the next step is, okay, if you really want to make more nature on your farm, that will impact you. I can show you something. Wait a minute, Paul.
You have visuals here. So those of you listening, he's got a little board here. What would you call this?
So I call this different values on a farm. So on a dairy farm, we produce different values. So we produce healthy food. We take care of the biodiversity on our farm. We take care of the soil quality, water quality, animal welfare, and climate. And as a farmer, you and I, we both know that all these subjects are connected. But what I see is that also if you look at consumers, society of politicians, they often focus on one theme.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say to the dairy farmer, okay, if you focus, we want you to that you reduce climate. If you reduce climate, it can negatively affect other items. So if you look at my farm, we have a lot of grassland. If I really want to reduce more climate impact, I have to feed the cows a lot more corn and a lot more wheat. But if you look at biodiversity in the soil or water quality, it's much worse. So the same is if you ask me to make a lot of nature on my fields, I produce less food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's all connected, and I think that's where our story started. So all the different topics on our farm, and we have the different values. We produce them all.
Mm-hmm.
They're all connected. So if you ask me as a farmer to make steps, we have to make always count on the other items as well.
Yeah, it affects the whole system when you make one change in one aspect, right?
Yeah, and I think as farmers we know, but we also see that like politicians often focus on one theme, and we only have to do that. So what we little bit see in the Netherlands and Western Europe is that, okay, food production is not so important anymore. We really need more nature. Yeah, okay, but then we produce less food. So how you cope with that? And I think that's really important. And of course, every farm is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe your farm is a little bit better on climate, and my farm is a little bit better on biodiversity. But we have the different goals, and we can make steps. Every farm can make steps on all the different items. But we need a model for rewarding as well. If we not only producing more milk, but also have more sustainable milk. And I think that's a big discussion, and it just started. But I think we really need to make that steps.
Thanks for that visual. That was really, really helpful. One thing that I wanted to ask you your perspective on now that you spent some time in the U.S. and Canada, especially the U.S., and we touched on this in a discussion yesterday. We've been together for a couple of days here, and we were talking about large farms in the U.S. And a lot of times you hear large farms say, "Hey, I'm more sustainable because I'm more efficient with resource use," which makes sense, right? And so that's the whole rationale behind getting larger, because I can financially be more sustainable and I'm using more resources more efficiently because I'm larger. Not always the case, but that's kind of the general rule of thumb. That's really accelerated the consolidation in a lot of the farming sectors in agriculture, especially in dairy in the US. And we see something very different in Europe where a lot of that size is capped. So you hear a lot of American farmers maybe throwing stones at the Europeans saying, well, we're continuing to be able to be more sustainable because of us being able to use resources more efficiently because of scale. So when somebody brings that up, what are your thoughts around that topic and that discussion?
So I think what the US is doing really good is the climate item, right?
And probably food production.
And food production. Yeah. So if you feed a cow a lot of corn and a lot of wheat, the methane production is lower.
Mm-hmm.
And the production is higher. Okay. But if you look at water quality, there's no crop better for water quality than like grassland.
Yeah, then a permanent crop that's always there, right?
Yeah, because it's always green.
Yeah.
And that's not that farmers are doing it not good, but grassland is always green. It's in the winter, it's green, so it always captures the nitrogen and the phosphate.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what I saw also in other countries in Europe, you see big difference in Europe as well, that the countries with less grassland, they have really problem with water quality. But if you feed a cow more grass, the methane production will become higher.
Yeah.
So you really have different subjects who are not really connecting. And like if you look at the Netherlands or maybe Europe, but I think the Netherlands in front is like the natural behavior of the animal is really important. So we have big discussions about natural behavior, and like grazing cows outside is really important for the society and for politicians. So it's not mandatory yet in the Netherlands, but on this moment, like 78% of the farms will graze their cows. If that will drop down to 75, maybe 70%, it will probably become mandatory that farmers must graze their cows. And I know that there are other countries already in the EU that grazing cows is so important that farmers must graze the cows. So, and then you have a total different approach than like in the US, that your cows are more inside and feed them their graze and maybe soya and wheat.
Mm-hmm.
That's a total different cow, also with different footprints on the different subjects. I think that's one. And the other one is, if you look at scaling up, the Netherlands has a quota system. For the listeners from the US, it's like Canada, right?
Yeah.
If you I started this trip in Canada. The Canadian farmers are really happy, but they have a quota system. They're almost impossible to grow, but they're really happy because they have a good milk price, etc. Closed market, and then you are entering the US, and it's open market, and you have to grow. So it's here you have really two different kind of worlds, and the EU is kind of in the middle. So we had a quota system in the past. Most countries don't have a quota system anymore, but in the Netherlands we have, because we were growing too fast with dairy cows that they start having a quota system on this moment. So it's really expensive with the quota system and high price for land. As an example, the grassland in my area is $40,000 plus an acre. Yeah, so how can you scale up with cows if your land price is $40,000 an acre, and you still have to buy like for $12,000 for one cow, and then you still have to build a barn for $10,000 a cow. So scaling up is really hard.
Yeah.
in
Very,
our
very
part of
capital
Europe.
intensive. Yeah.
So we have to focus on other items, and I think that's a big difference. If you look at efficiency, in Europe it's really family farmed, and I think in the US it's really focusing on how much milk can you produce with one labor hour or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are more family farmed.
Yeah. Yeah. Where the focus isn't necessarily maximizing labor potential. It's really maximizing the social benefits as well as the financial benefits of that farm.
And I don't say that what we are doing is good and in the US is bad, because like in the Netherlands, you have farmers, they probably work around 80, 90 hours a week, and they cannot go on holiday, etc. So that's the other side, right?
Yeah.
If you do everything with your family, probably you don't have less socialized contact sometimes, but it's really two different kind of worlds.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, pivoting a little bit, I want to get your take. The regenerative ag movement has been getting a lot of attention over the last 12 to 24 months. And I think a lot of people in the US, when they hear regenerative or when they hear biodiversity, the first thing they think of is regenerative. So in your mind, is there a difference between the two? Or when somebody says biodiversity, having a focus on biodiversity, does that really mean farming more with a regenerative mindset?
I think it can be both. We have different kind of biodiversity, right? It starts with the soil. I think the soil is really important also for farmers, because the healthy of your soil is really important for the crops you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think really in dairy farming as well, that we can really make steps to improve the soil health on our farms. And I think manure is really important to help that. And like we have kind of gold on our farms with manure, so we can improve the soil health. But there it starts, and then of course you have the insects and the birds and maybe the bigger animals as well. If you look at, but what I told before, it started with, if you want to improve your biodiversity, it starts with less emissions, less climate, less ammonia, less nitrates, and then you can improve it on your fields. And you can do it, of course, in the soil. We see in Europe a lot of herbaceous grassland, so multi-species grassland, instead of multi or mono Engels rye. You get really multi-species herbaceous grassland with clovers and other herbs. You know the English names better than
Plantain and things like that, chicory.
Yeah. So we can see that coming up. I think that's really important, because it's a combination between more biodiversity and still production and less fertilizer. And of course, then you have the hedges you can do, or on around farm buildings as well. We always look at our fields, but around our farm buildings, we can also do a lot with more biodiversity. I think regenerative agriculture will touch that. For me, it's kind of still a black box, because what is regenerative? And some people will say, okay, so it's no-till cover crops. I don't know if that's it. I think it's also maybe less fertilizer, crop protection, whatever. So I think we don't have the golden standard yet.
Mm-hmm.
What I know is that if you look at regenerative, it's really hard to be regenerative on really expensive land. If your production is going down by 10%, but your price of the land is like 40,000 an acre, it's really hard if you still have to pay your interest on your bank, etc. So that's kind of a struggle, and that's why you really need the extra money. So if you look at my farm, what we already did in the Netherlands, maybe that's a good example. We built a whole data system. So on my farm, we have a whole data system. That's
I love my data stuff, right?
the audience will know that you love data. So we have a whole data system, and there are KPIs coming out. Yeah, so KPIs for water quality, air quality, climate, but also imported feed when I import it. And my milk is going to Friesland Campina, one of the biggest cooperations in the world, and they will pay me extra money because I reached some important key performance indicators. And I think what's really important also over there is what we did is we built one system and everyone can use it. So the Rabobank, and Rabobank is a bank worldwide.
Yep.
I don't know how
we have them here in the US. Yep.
Yeah. So I have to pay less interest at Rabobank because I reached some sustainable goals from the Rabobank in the Netherlands. So with the same key performance indicators. And I think that's really important because farmers are not, they don't want to have more paperwork, right? So we have to build a system kind of that it's globally all the same because you don't like if Danone or Mars is buying milk in the US or buying milk in the Netherlands or in France or in New Zealand, they must have kind of the same program that they can measure it together and have the same key performance indicators. And then they can pay also for it. And I think they also must pay. Yeah? So if really we must make steps on sustainability, we need to get more paid for that. And on the end, the consumer should pay more. But from my point of view, if they pay now 8%, they can pay 9% from their income for food. And we can make good steps on that as well.
So in your mind, having one system globally, I understand from the aspect of a lot of these companies that are targeting these goals are global companies, so that would make a lot of sense. Going back to the geographical differences and some of the farming practice differences, do you think that's achievable?
I think so, because I think that there are some items that are really important. What I saw was like water quality, nitrate and water quality is one item that's globally. Water use is probably one item that's globally important. Also, now climate, of course, your climate impact is important as well. And then you can see, okay, what can we do with hedges and etc. On our farm? You can make models for that to measure it as well, and that's different for different countries.
Right.
But I think that the first step is that we must be willing to take the steps, and we must bring partners together. And I spoke a lot of people during my Nuffield. You know how a Nuffield travel is, eh? You speak a lot of people. So my goal was to speak to at least 100 persons worldwide, globally, in at least 12 different countries. And you see that there's willingness between the big corporations as well to work together, to work on one kind of data set. And every country has different approach to get their data in, but I think it will be achievable. And of course, not next year, but I think in the next five years, we will make big steps. And some countries will be a little bit behind, and other countries will be in front. What I think is really important also over there is if you have the data, you have to certify it as well, right? So no one is paying you for your data if it's not controlled. So yeah, that's the next step we have to take as well as farmers or as farmers cooperations. Yeah.
Yep. Pivoting a little bit more back to your Nuffield, what was something that you were very surprised to learn as you were traveling around?
I think one of the items was that, like, for us in the Netherlands, biodiversity is top of mind item. And a lot of countries don't even think about it. So they're still working on climate. Okay, climate, that's important. Yes, of course. But biodiversity is the next thing. So a lot of countries is biodiversity not top of mind. So they have to still start thinking that is important because you will make the next step when you think it's important. So I think that's one of the items I saw was really changing as well. Yeah.
And along with that, what are you hoping changes from the study that you've done, from the research and the communications? You're spending a lot of time communicating, speaking, talking to people, connecting people globally on this topic. What are you hoping that brings about?
So the first one is exchange knowledge. So the Nuffield traject. I started my Nuffield with building a website. Biodiversity was still free. I was surprised for that, so I booked that one. So all the information about my travels and my knowledge and what I saw in different countries is on my website. So I think learning from each other is really important. So don't start over again in each country to learn again, but learn from each other. I think that's really important. I was in France one time and I spoke to a French farmer and he was saying, okay, I delivered my milk to Danone, I think it was. And he's saying, yeah, but Danone is not paying me sustainable milk price. And I said, yeah, I'm not a farmer from Danone, but Danone is paying me because we have our data set in Friesland Campina and Friesland Campina is selling products to Danone and Danone is paying extra money for my sustainable milk. Yeah, so I think it's really important that if you have a data set, that every country should work on a data set. It all starts with data. You can only sell your products, sustainable products, if you can prove that it is better than what you did before.
Yeah.
And I always have discussions with farmers in the Netherlands as well. They say, yeah, but why do we need to do things with data? And it's like the chicken and the egg. So first you have to invest in like data sets and prove that you're doing the good things and start certifying that. And then you have to try to sell them as well. But yeah, you know that as well, how that works with data.
Yeah. I talk about the framework that I've developed is the 4 different value levels of farm data. And the third level is the proof value. So proving how you actually farm, proving a practice on your farm. That's a very high level of value that we as producers can acquire. But as you said, it takes work, it takes infrastructure, and it takes time to develop those data sets and be able to make sure that the market has trust in that, right?
Yeah, and the market is trust, and also that there's no competition between data sets, because I was in some countries and they have like, then a farmer can choose between 12 different measuring tools for climate. And then I thought, yeah, is this the way? Like in the Netherlands, we have one measuring tool for climate and your mineral nutrient loop for every farmer. It doesn't depend on which dairy co-op your milk is going to. We're all using the same thing. And I think that's really kind of important as well, because it must be kind of standard.
Yeah, it allows you to compare apples to apples, right?
Yeah. And then you can also, I always say that there's not one party who will pay enough money to get enough reward for biodiversity. You have to put it all together. Huh? So for my farm, okay, I get rewarded by Friesland Campina. It's almost more than 2 euro cents a liter of milk. You can count it in dollars per, but yeah, it's 2 euro cents a liter extra for sustainable milk. And then the Rabobank is paying, then I have to pay less interest at the Rabobank. And maybe in the future, the government is using the same data and keep from syndicators as well. And then you can all level it up. And then it's really worth to make step on sustainable milk, to produce more sustainable milk, because there's not one party that pays enough to really change your whole farm.
So as we wrap up here, Wilco, what's one final thing that you took away from your Nuffield time, and what was your favorite place that you've gone and really enjoyed being at so far?
Ooh, my favorite place. For me, I think it was Brazil. From European perspective, we always hear the stories from the NGOs that in Brazil there's no biodiversity, all the rainforest is destroyed and everything. And for me, it was really an eye opener that like every farm over there has like 20% of their of their land is nature.
Yeah.
And if
Minimum, right?
minimum.
Yeah.
And then if you're closer to the rainforest or in the rainforest, is still 80%.
Yeah.
So every farm. So we were on a farm with 5,000 hectares. So that's like, 12,000 acres. They have 20% was nature, real nature. So for me, that was kind of an eye opener, that sometimes you get a look from your own newspapers, from your own media, from your own bubble, and you have a kind of a view of a country, but it's sometimes totally different. And I think that's kind of interesting. And that's also Nuffield, right? You travel around the world, you get friends and people everywhere, and if you have questions, you ask them. And I think that's really important, that also farmers and young farmers, they must see wider than their own farm or their own region, because we live in a global world and everything is connected.
Yeah.
So you need to see what's happening around you and not only stay in your own bubble.
Yeah, and don't just listen to the big media, heads of media, about what's actually going on you're willing to take the time, go travel there, go visit, go talk to the people that are actually there day to day doing the work, and you learn what's really happening in a region. So that's what I've got out of it, and it sounds like similar experience for you. So I just want to put a quick plug in for Nuffield right now. If you're listening to this and you're in the U.S., the application period for the 2027 Nuffield Scholars is open right now. I believe it goes until the end of September. So if you're listening to this and you're interested, check out the Nuffield USA website, apply there. I believe the applications are on the website. If you're listening to this from another country, most likely there's a Nuffield opportunity as well. And usually those close about the same time. So check those websites out. Check Nuffield International's website out if you're interested in applying for a Nuffield scholarship. So I just wanted to put that plug in there. I know I've gotten a lot of great opportunities, a lot of doors open, and have really had my eyes widen to the broader world of agriculture and what's really happening around the world. And Wilco, I think you can attest to that as well. Definitely. So I want to just thank you for being here and spending a couple of days together here. We're filming this in my office here in Michigan, and it's been fun having you here, and look forward to all the things you have coming up in the future.
Thank you, Paul.
More thing before we go, mention your website one more time where people can find more about you.
Yeah, so it's biodiversityindairy.com, and of course, if you have questions, there's contact information over there.
Are you active on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and of course, if they have questions about Nuffield, they can also contact me or you as well.
That's right. So with that, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the AgCulture Podcast. Check out our website and our newsletter. Check out our friends of the show. I want to just thank them quickly for being able to help support this show and bring episodes like this to your listening ears. So with that, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.